Hey guys, so this is going to be a catch-up review. Basically, a bunch of stuff came out in October and I've sort of been falling behind on the stuff that I wanted to talk about. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about What If, I'm going to be talking about No Time to Die, Halloween Kills, and Dune. So What If came out, I saw it every week, and it was basically pretty good for the most part. I feel like I don't necessarily need to describe what the concept is, but if you don't know, it's alternate universes of the MCU seeing sort of what if situations, hence the title of stuff that could have happened. The animation's good. The show overall is pretty good. I liked it. But I'm going to get more into that after I go through each individual episode. So the first episode was What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger? And I think this is my least favorite episode just because it's sort of a remake of the first Avenger without adding too much more. And I had a problem with the pacing of it. It felt like it zoomed by like really fast. The first Avenger is already a movie with a montage to zoom past stuff, so this having a montage made it go by really quick in a way that felt kind of rushed, and made me wish some of the episodes could be a bit longer. But that being said, Haley Atwell's a good voice actor. Sebastian Stan, not so much, unfortunately. Dominic Cooper, pretty good. But yeah, this first episode was not really my thing. The next episode, though, What If T'Challa Became a Star-Lord, is one of my favorites. I thought it was really cool and creative, and it used the what if idea a lot better. Seeing Thanos just be like a really chill guy and not wanting to destroy the universe is fun. The whole thing of like Nebula like being like better off, and it just shows that Peter Quill it was not reaching its full potential, but at the same time it's not like he had this responsibility to do these things. It's just based off of Quill's personality versus T'Challa's. T'Challa is obviously more of a leadership role. And yeah, like it was just really fun and cool. I liked Howard the Duck. I like Benicio del Toro as a collector, all that really good stuff. Seeing his collection of like previous Avengers stuff, like having him be like higher up in power because of Thanos's like non-involvement essentially. There is a lot of goofy stuff in this show and I'm gonna get to that more, but it doesn't really bother me because of the idea that this is an alternate universe, and if the universe is completely vast and limitless, these things would have to have happened in some universe. And also it doesn't bother me so much because it's not the main timeline, so it's not like it like completely ruins anything. Then episode 3, What If the World Lost Its Mightiest Heroes? This one I didn't like the first time I watched it. Second time I liked it more, just on the fact that the what if concept of it isn't revealed until the end. And basically the Avengers are getting assassinated one by one, and you're sort of like trying to figure out like what the deal is. And at first I find it frustrating because since we don't know the what if or hints of the what if, there's no way for us to actually figure out who in the situation could be the killer because they're not in the situation. Usually with murder mysteries, the person's in the room and you can try to figure out who it is. But with this, it's not revealed who the person in the room is until the end because he was not in the room. But yeah, second time around, it's like if you have a knowledge of the MCU, it does work out a little bit better. Some of the humor in this, like I guess in the live action universe would have crossed a line, but here again, there's something about it being alternate timelines where if it does get really goofy and silly, it doesn't bother me. And I'm really going to get into that with the Thor episode. But the next one is What If Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? That one, a lot of people say is their favorite, and I thought it was really good too. Just seeing him try to bring back Christine over and over again in this timeline was interesting. Also, the fact that the Ancient One said that was impossible in that timeline is interesting because obviously in the main MCU timeline, Christine is alive. So her splitting Steven into two halves only happened within this one timeline. It didn't create a branch reality. So that's really cool and weird. And yeah, the ending was pretty strong. It had some vibes of the Twilight Zone, the sort of just like really sad like hopelessness, I guess. And that sort of continues into the last episode, which I'll get to. And I have some sort of mixed feelings about that, but we'll get to that. Then it is What If Zombies. This one I thought was really fun, but tonally it was a bit weird. The On one hand, I do think it's funny that Peter Parker would make a guide on how to survive the zombies, but at the same time, later he has this whole speech about how Aunt May and Uncle Ben and Tony Stark and Happy are all dead because of the zombie apocalypse. So those don't really work together. I thought the voice actor for Peter Parker was pretty good, but it was a little bit distracting knowing it wasn't Tom Holland. I love the inclusion of Kurt from the Ant-Man movies, specifically the setup and payoff of the Baba Yaga thing. He mentions it, and then we see zombies, Scarlet Witch, and the stuff with Vision feeding Scarlet Witch the humans was awesome. That was really great and messed up. And yeah, that was like one of my favorite episodes, probably. It was cool seeing Happy have the Iron Watch from Civil War. That was really cool. And yeah, just seeing the Avengers, the remaining ones, get picked off one by one was great. And having that continue into an episode in season 2 would be really cool. Also, I have to mention, Paul Rudd is one of the best voice actors on the entire show. Him and Chris Hemsworth were my two favorites. They just, they don't feel like they're reading lines off a page into a microphone like some other actors do. They just feel extremely natural, and their voice match the animation of their characters amazingly. And Scott Lang is just ahead in that zombie episode, but there's just something about it that there's like an energy to both of them, which I'll get to obviously when I get into the Thor stuff more. After that was What If Killmonger Rescued Tony Stark. This one was cool. The idea that Killmonger, he like sort of snakes his way into Stark Industries. Tony Stark doesn't develop a conscience because he doesn't get trapped by the Ten Rings in Afghanistan. Then Obadiah Stane is publicly called out by Killmonger, which leads to him not being Ironmonger. The thing that people complain about, which I do agree with, is that his plan is basically just the Black Panther plan, but done slightly differently. And yeah, it is a bit annoying and weird to when we get What If episodes that are basically slightly different versions of something that happened, as opposed to something crazy like zombies, which was really cool. The voice acting for Tony Stark was pretty good though, and also the writing for his character. A lot of what he said felt right, and it wasn't as distracting as some of the other voice replacements. But yeah, it was overall a pretty good episode. The cliffhanger was a little sudden, I guess. But yeah, it was a good episode overall. Then we have What If Thor Were an Only Child. This is the Party Thor episode, and you either love this episode or you hate this episode. I kind of loved it because even though, again, I get what everyone's saying, it's ridiculous and it's a joke, this is another timeline, and if the universe is limitless, this had to happen to them. That doesn't mean Marvel had to show it to us. Maybe Marvel could have told us a better story that wasn't this. That's completely fair, but I just kind of had fun with this. Sometimes, for example, The Simpsons will do a weird little cartoon where Maggie has a lightsaber and fights another baby, and no one gets mad at that. Of course, The Simpsons can be outrageous sometimes, but I sort of view What If in the sort of same vein of just this is sort of this doesn't count, so it's fine. Let's just try and enjoy this. Let's not put too much weight on this. Some other episodes, like the Doctor Strange one, obviously do have that kind of weight, but again, since this isn't happening in the main timeline, it's not really a big deal. Something that I thought about was I really hate the last Star Wars movie, The Rise of Skywalker. I've sort of slightly warmed up to it, but I still generally hate it just because so many terrible decisions were made. However, if you did a different official Star Wars Episode 9, and then in a What If Star Wars series, you were like, oh yeah, what if the Emperor came back and he had a bunch of Star Destroyers and Rey fought him? As a What If episode, I'd be completely fine with that because it doesn't matter and you get to see Rey fight the Emperor. But having it be the actual story is annoying and bothers me. Where the same situation is happening here, if we took a movie and dedicated a whole bunch of it to this sort of Thor stuff, I wouldn't be into that. But seeing that it's just a quick little What If cartoon, it's okay in my opinion. So I did like it. Loki and Thor's relationship was pretty fun and interesting, seeing how they got along. Even though Loki basically challenged Thor to become a better person, I suppose, in the original Thor film. Darcy married Howard the Duck. Okay. I thought the thing with Elvis marrying them was so funny. Then there's the Surtur with the Statue of Liberty. Again, it's stupid, but I really don't care. Um, and like the callback to Avengers Endgame where Rocket's in the sink and then Thor's like, "Hey, it's a rabbit." That was all really great. Yeah, I didn't really have a problem with the episode. Seeing Captain Marvel and Thor fight, really cool. And then Captain Marvel cannot pick up Mjolnir. I'm just gonna quickly address this. To be fair, this is like, not to be fair. I hate giving the Captain Marvel side an argument, but in this universe, it seems that Odin did not put the Worth spell on Mjolnir, meaning only Thor can pick up Mjolnir, and not because he's worthy. So we technically still don't know if Captain Marvel can pick up Mjolnir. I hope she can't, because I don't like her character. She's very boring, but I hate to give the other side an argument. That's their argument, and it's completely valid and makes logical sense. So, next episode, What If Ultron Won? This one was really cool. Having this sort of Vision Ultron hybrid as he was intending to do in Age of Ultron was cool. Finally seeing what that looks like. Ultron is not voiced by James Spader. It's an impression, and a very clear James Spader impression. And yeah, like, the episode was cool, having him basically destroy Earth and the universe, and then being like, now what do I do? Him getting the stones from Thanos and like taking him out. At first I had a problem with that, but then, as other people and my brother brought up, the thing in Infinity War is that Vision was weakened, so it's not that he couldn't have just done that and Infinity War is broken. Vision was not at his full power, so maybe he could have cut Thanos in half if he was at full power, but seeing that he got stabbed, that wasn't going to be a possibility. The other interesting thing is Thanos has all the stones, but later when Ultron's taking over, we see Gamora fighting for the Sovereign with the other Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's like, who did Thanos throw in there to get the Soul Stone? Maybe they messed up, but that's still an interesting thought. So the episode also sees Clint and Natasha in the sort of post-Ultron rule, the Age of Ultron, a real Age of Ultron, unlike the film. And they're sort of trying to deal with the aftermath of the death of the other Avengers. Of course, the two that are left are the two just human ones that have no powers. Clint has a robotic Ultron arm, which is pretty cool. And basically, they tie it into Winter Soldier and Civil War in a really interesting way. They download Zola from the file. It's another one of the ones that we've seen in Winter Soldier, but instead it's in the base where the super soldiers were being programmed and raised that Zola was in at the end of Civil War. And they're basically downloading Zola into Ultron. This episode has some really beautiful shots. The whole show does, but this one specifically, like when Clint's falling, that's all really great. And they attempt to download Zola into one of the Ultron bots, which they do, but it doesn't work because Ultron needs to be, I don't know if they said in the universe or on the planet or what, but he's not around for all the Ultron bots to get hacked, so it doesn't work. And then that sort of leads into the final episode, which is What If the Watcher Broke His Oath? And I just quickly want to say the Watcher is voiced by Jeffrey Wright, and he's doing a really great job. Having him do the voice of the Watcher is really cool. He's got a great voice, obviously, and yeah, he's definitely a highlight of the show. Great pick for Marvel. And yeah, so then this is basically the crossover episode that I'm sort of torn on. The Watcher brings in people from each of the realities from the episodes we've seen, including Gamora, who killed Thanos, who's hanging out building the Infinity Crusher or whatever that was, with Tony Stark, who has a mech suit made of Sakaar debris. And the reason that is out of nowhere is because Marvel said there was an episode that they did not complete in time for the first season, and I guess it was that episode. Basically the idea being that Tony Stark, at the end of the first Avengers, he doesn't make it through the wormhole before Natasha closes it, and when he blows up the Chitauri mothership. So then he ends up on Sakaar and he meets Valkyrie. So the episode's not complete, which is why that's very random. So Watcher brings them all together, and there's part of me that wishes these episodes were just like independent from each other, but it was obvious they were going to cross over at some point. And also there's another part of me that's like, this is cool, and at the same time it doesn't really make much sense why of all the multiverse versions of Thor you pick this one. Obviously his reality was taken over by Ultron, but it seems like a lot of Thors would have had their realities taken over by Ultron. And again, to the credit of the rules of the show, the Watcher can see the future basically. So it seems that by picking the stupid party Thor, it was going to be the only way that they win. The same way that it's like people are still mad at Peter Quill for punching Thanos in Infinity War, but if he doesn't do that, they don't win in the end. So that was necessary. Even if he didn't do that, Thanos, like, judging by what Doctor Strange said, would have found a way to win, and in a permanent way. So this sort of works in the same way where it's like dumb party Thor is part of the equation that will lead them to win against Ultron. And the episode's okay. It's pretty good. It's a longer one, and it does feel a little bit rushed, I guess. Just the idea of like bringing them together based off these 20-minute episodes. But yeah, like the show is basically building up to this, and it's pretty good. My overall thoughts on the show: it's pretty good. It does not offend me when it gets too goofy or silly. I heard one critic refer to it as cute. I feel completely the same way. It's cute. It does not need to be a masterpiece, in my opinion. So yeah, those were my thoughts on What If. So now I'm going to talk about No Time to Die, which I saw opening day like a week ago. So No Time to Die is the fifth and final Daniel Craig James Bond movie, and it has Daniel Craig in it, Lee Seydoux coming back as Madeline Swan, and Rami Malek as the villain Safin. So you basically can't watch these movies without having seen all the other ones. Usually James Bond movies do not work that way, but the Craig movies have had this sort of legacy where the stories lead into each other. You can't just go into this movie blind. You have to have seen the first four. And before watching this, I watched all of them. I watched Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre, and then now here we are. And this movie, I think, is a really good send-off for Daniel Craig's James Bond in ways that were pretty unexpected and still tied into the very start of his journey in ways that I also was not expecting. The action's really good, acting's good. Daniel Craig actually puts effort into this movie, even though he previously said he'd rather slash his wrists than come back as James Bond. Rami Malek's character is fine, but his performance is good. He just doesn't have a lot to do, like, with the character. And there's not a lot I can say about this without getting into spoilers, which I will do. Not now, but I'll give a warning for that. Just overall, the movie's good, the action's good, it's a good send-off for Daniel Craig. Acting's good. A lot of threads are tied up from the previous four films, and I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think it'll probably make my top 10 of the year, maybe towards the bottom, but still in my top 10. So yeah, No Time to Die. It's good. Go see it. I can't really talk about it without getting into spoilers. So here are the spoilers for No Time to Die. Here we go. We got some cool background stuff with Madeline Swan. In Spectre, she mentions that a guy came to her house and tried to kill her when she was a kid, and I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be the opening of this film, where Rami Malek's character comes and tries to kill her. He wants revenge on her father. He wants revenge on Madeline's father, Mr. White, who has obviously been here since Casino Royale, for killing his family, basically. And so that seeing that was really interesting. The stuff with Bond thinking Madeline betrayed him to Spectre was really cool, and how he just like threw her on a train and didn't see her for 5 years, even though it turns out it wasn't her fault and it was actually Blofeld the whole time. That action scene was really great. Well done. I also like that this movie has more of like the old-fashioned Bond stuff in it, like more of the gadgets and like weird traits, like the guy with the robot eye. This is all stuff you would have never seen in Casino Royale because of how grounded it was, but they've sort of naturally developed to a place where it doesn't feel weird that we have more of like the goofy James Bond tropes. Ana de Armas is also in the movie. She's not in it for long, but I really liked how her character was. Basically, Phoebe Waller-Bridge came in to do rewrites, and I'd be shocked to find out that she didn't write the entirety of her character, basically. As well as some stuff from the new 007 that took James Bond's title as 007, obviously. And that's sort of like fun banter between them of, the name doesn't really matter, that kind of stuff. Q is really good in the movie. The joke with the teapot was the best thing in the whole movie. Best joke in the whole movie, really hilarious. So other more spoilery stuff, basically all of Spectre gets eliminated, and that's such a obvious but good way of showing that your new villain is more imposing, having the new villain kill the old villain. All Spectre gets terminated, including Blofeld, by accident because of Bond having the nanobots on his hand. Then it's also revealed that James has a daughter with Madeline Swan that he did not know about. And the scene where they're driving and they're in the woods, it really shows how vulnerable Bond can be, and I thought that was really great. There's this sort of vulnerability to him throughout the entirety of the movie that feels very real and makes you really care for him in a way where it's not like he's a superhero that can do anything like in the 60s films. And not even just the 60s films, even up to Pierce Brosnan, he felt there was a sort of invincibility to him, and he didn't feel vulnerable until Craig came along. And there's just something like more real and human about it that I really enjoy. So of course, Safin dies. Then it's revealed that Bond has the nanobots on him that have interacted with Madeline and his daughter's DNA, meaning he can never touch them again without killing them. Safin shuts the doors, obviously before he dies. Bond goes and pulls the lever, does the whole thing again, opens it up so the missiles can destroy the facility where the nanobots are gonna go and basically kill everyone. And then James Bond dies. He dies in this movie, and I heard someone say this movie did not expect the way I thought it would. And that's when something triggered in my brain, and I was like, does James Bond die in this movie? Yep, he dies. And it was really weird and emotional because I had just rewatched the first 4 films. And yeah, like, it felt oddly right. It felt a little weird, but it felt right, I think. And, you gotta have a way for Daniel Craig to never come back. And they found it. And I think this just like wraps up like a good 15 years of James Bond that we've had with this like really great actor in a way that was pretty satisfying. And hopefully we will not get a reboot for another like 10 years or something, because this still feels too fresh. But yeah, it ended in a really satisfying way, and that's basically the best way I can describe this movie. It ends in it's the ending of 5 movies, 15 years in a way that feels very satisfying. So yeah, those were my thoughts on No Time to Die. Moving on, I also saw Halloween Kills. So Halloween Kills is technically Halloween 3 in the new continuity, those being the original Halloween from 1978, then the stupidly named Halloween from 2018, and then now Halloween Kills. So those are the 3 movies in the new continuity. The 4th and final one, Halloween Ends, will be coming out next year, I'm pretty sure, because they filmed 2 and 3 back to back, or really 3 and 4 back to back. And I heard different things about this movie. I heard some people really liked it. I heard some people did not like it. And I was expecting something mediocre. So I'm oddly embarrassed to say I kind of liked this movie a lot. People were saying it had too many like political messages, and it wasn't. It didn't have like the same scares of like what makes Halloween Halloween. But I feel like this movie, unlike the 2018 one, sort of brought it back to the basics in a way that was really satisfying. Also, it does that sequel thing, that Back to the Future thing, where it picks up right where the last one left off, and I always really love when films do that. So yeah, like, I oddly like the movie, and I feel weird for saying that because I know it's not like the most popular opinion, especially among movie critics. But the first 12 minutes specifically hooked me. And then I was just like sort of in it for the rest of it. It's not like a masterpiece or anything, but I did like it a lot. And there's like details that I want to get into, but I feel like I can't really get into without going into spoilers. But you might like this movie and you might hate it. I really don't know. But because the opinions are so mixed, but I personally did like it as sort of just going back to the basics and adding some new ideas that I liked. The ideas aren't exactly polished, they could have been done better, but I didn't really mind at the same time. So I'm gonna get more into spoilers now. It's not really spoilers, but it's more plot details and some spoilers. Um, but yeah, just know that I like the movie. Uh, I think it's directed well. The music is like amazing. John Carpenter, I'm pretty sure, is still doing the score. I know he did it for the last one. I'm not sure if he did it for this one. And yeah, like it's good. I mean, I like it. A lot of people don't. A lot of people do. You should see it. Gonna go into spoilers. So this movie picks up right where the last one left off, and we see the boyfriend from the first movie. And this immediately goes into something that I really like about this movie. When watching the 2018 one, I was like annoyed by all this stuff that they bring up that just we never saw. At the end of the original Halloween, Michael Myers disappears. And then at the beginning of 2018 Halloween, he's in the mental institution. So they talk about when he got captured, and they talk about there's this cop and he's like, oh yeah, like Dr. Loomis was gonna shoot Michael, but I stopped him. And it's like, it would have been really cool to see all that stuff. And then there's also another thing people brought up is that in the first one, the Halloween 2018 film, you've got the boyfriend who cheats on Laurie's granddaughter, who's an asshole, and then he doesn't die. Like, it's basic like horror movie rules that's supposed to happen, and we just don't see him again. And then in this movie, we see him, and they do a sort of like Steve Harrington, and they make him like a better guy. Like, they make him a more likable character. So this movie like does a lot of stuff where it's just like, oh, here's what you wanted from before, but just continued. You see what my favorite scene is in the movie, that they show how Michael got caught at the end of the original Halloween, and you see just all that stuff that like I wanted to see, basically, that they talked about but didn't show. So the movie starts off with the boyfriend. He's sort of walking around and he sees the cop who got stabbed by the new Loomis, as they call him in the 2018 one, lying on the ground. And then we flash back to my favorite scene in the movie, which is Halloween 1978. And we see the young cop following Michael Myers. I was very distracted by the fact that he had like a bright, shiny new mask. And I'm like, oh, he literally just stole it today. It's the same night. And the movie is shot differently from that part of the movie is shot differently from the rest of the film, because there's a lot of grain and they make it look like a 70s movie. And then you basically see that he follows Michael into the house, and Michael just has this, like, they added this new bit of lore to him that he like has this obsession with looking out the window. So then yeah, we just basically see how all that goes down, and there's a really amazing callback to the original Halloween where Michael's standing in front of the house, all the cops are surrounding him, and then we just slowly dolly out backwards, and it's recreating the shot from the original Halloween when Michael is 6 years old and then his parents pull his mask off. It's the same shot, and obviously a reference to that. That was really cool. And then the title sequence starts, and then you also have other cool stuff of like Lonnie, who's the kid who's bullying Anthony Michael Hall's character Tommy. We see him again as a little kid, and we see he had an interaction with Michael Myers, and then that leads into the rest of the movie. All of them are grown up. Tommy, Lonnie, the nurse from the beginning of the original Halloween's here for some reason, and then Lindsay, and they're basically like haunted by the massacres of Michael Myers from 1978. And they basically like form a mob together, and they try to find Michael Myers. Another patient also escaped. They kill him by accident. And then there's this sort of political idea of mob mentality and how rage and fear can sort of blind us from like logic and from rationale. And people say that's kind of forced, and I see what they're saying. Specifically this one scene where the cop is like talking about how like maybe Michael's looking at his reflection and not out the window, and he's looking at himself. And then like is this a metaphor? Like we have to like look at ourselves and like see who the real monster is or whatever. So like when the other patient throws himself out the window, and then the Sheriff Brackett, who was cool to see, he's like, he's making us the monsters now, and it's like, all right, we get it. Like, you don't gotta say it. But seeing Sheriff Brackett again was cool. Laurie spends most of the movie in bed, but that didn't really bother me because I felt still entertained by the other characters. When Michael kills the nurse and the other people that were in the bar, he like does like the hand smashing thing on the window, which is from the original Halloween, where he jumps on top of the car. That was really cool. And then there's also another reference to the original Halloween when towards the end of the movie, when he before he like completely kills the boyfriend, he takes Laurie's granddaughter and throws her over the railing, and she tumbles down the stairs, which is exactly from the original Halloween. Also, another thing is, I think the use of the musical stings is done really well, specifically back in the 70s scenes. But yeah, I think that they use the little Halloween stings, the little musical stings, in really effective ways. Also, it was cool to see we saw this in the Halloween 2018 when I rewatched it, but you see the three masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, a movie I've never seen. And yeah, so those are here as like a reference to that. And also, Laurie being in the hospital bed is kind of a Halloween 2 reference. I've never seen the entirety of the original Halloween 2. I've seen the first like 20 minutes and I was enjoying it, but I was like, it was like a subscription and I like just canceled it and never watched the rest of it. But yeah, like another thing is the kills. The kills are very brutal throughout the film. Michael Myers kills a lot of people in the movie, and yeah, it's just like well done. The kills look really good. And then when Laurie's daughter goes up to the room where Michael's sister, isn't her name Julia Myers? I don't know. Judith Myers. When Judith Myers, she goes to the Judith Myers room, and then she just like gets killed. I was genuinely surprised by that. And also like when the mob is just like beating the shit out of him and he just murders all of them after they had like the upper hand on him. I thought that was all really cool, and they just like unceremoniously and amazingly killed a bunch of original characters. So yeah, overall, I do like the movie. Again, some of the ideas of mob mentality or whatever, they don't really add up, and the ideas aren't, the message is muddy, is what I'll say. And I do like the idea that the entire town is basically coming after Michael Myers, and that they like mess up because of their fear of him, essentially. But I was also watching other reviews, and people brought up that realistically, all these people that were affected by Michael Myers when they were kids or young adults would have most likely just moved away and like gotten over it. Maybe not completely gotten over it, but they wouldn't be hanging out in the same town where this traumatic experience happened. And it'd be less likely that the rest of the mob would form around these people that have this incident that's personal to them, where these other people have not experienced Michael Myers. And also another thing that people have been complaining about is that the patient that they're after, who they think is Michael Myers, physically looks nothing like him. And I had an argument for it until I didn't, which is basically none of the other townspeople have ever really gotten a good look at Michael Myers, even with the mask on. So I was sort of okay with them accidentally killing this guy because they don't even, it's like they're told to be angry and afraid, and they are, and then they just kill this guy without even knowing what Michael looks like. That makes sense to me, but then afterwards Tommy and the sheriff's like, it's not him, and then Tommy's like, are you sure we haven't seen him with his mask off? And it's like, I don't understand how Tommy could not have remembered how scary and tall and not that weight Michael Myers was when he was a kid. Even as a kid, he probably would have projected him as even scarier than what he physically was, and that dude's body shape was not the body shape of Michael Myers, let's put it that way. So I was okay with it until Tommy said that line, and I was like, alright, that's just kind of dumb. But I do like that Tommy, who seemed like this like innocent kid, basically grew up to be this like asshole based off of his traumatic experience. And I like that him and Lonnie became friends, even though he used to bully him all the time. And also the reveal that Lonnie is the father of Laurie's granddaughter's boyfriend was pretty interesting and cool. They like weaved some stuff together in ways where it feels like when they wrote the 2018 one, they didn't know it was going to be that, but it did happen to work out in a way that felt natural.
Also, I was really confused by the Loomis flashback at the beginning of the film. And it turns out the reason it looks so good is because there was a guy on set who looked a lot like Donald Pleasance, and they just put a bunch of makeup on him, and it looks amazing. I was not sure what they did, but I was like, that's definitely Donald Pleasance. It's not, and it's better than any CG abomination they could have created.
So yeah, those are my general thoughts on Halloween Kills. I liked it. It's not going to be for everyone. Some people like it, some people don't, as I've said many times. You should go see it and tell me what you think. So the other thing I watched was Denis Villeneuve's Dune, which is technically Dune Part 1. I went to see it opening night. I was very excited. Dune was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, solely on the fact that the last film Denis Villeneuve made, Blade Runner 2049, is one of the only modern movies to ever get on my top 10 list of favorite films of all time. So going to see what he did next after that was really exciting, and Dune is a really good film. So if you don't know, Dune is a film based off of the novel written in the 70s by Frank Herbert, and it's basically a sci-fi fantasy adventure, and it has characters from this planet going to a desert planet called Arrakis for this valuable material called spice, and things sort of develop from there in ways that should not be spoiled. But the film has Timothée Chalamet, Javier Bardem, Jason Momoa, Zendaya, Josh Brolin, Oscar Isaac, Stellan Skarsgård, Rebecca Ferguson, David Dastmalchian. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. And with all those actors, they do a really great job in the film. They're all amazing picks, and I think that Denis Villeneuve's characters, obviously this is based off a book, but his characters in his movies have sort of a solemn, kind of anti-personality sometimes, that's sort of a tightrope walk, because they can come off as boring if you make them uninteresting enough, but I think here he finds a good balance between them being kind of more reserved and emotionless, I guess, in a way that's interesting. I think it's done better in Blade Runner 2049, but of course in that there are robots, so it makes sense that to be less emotional. The thing with this movie is that it's kind of hard to talk about because it's such a dense film. There's so much packed into it, and after leaving it, I sort of had this weird feeling of neutrality towards it. I know I do like it. I don't know if I love it, but I remember after seeing Blade Runner 2049, which is longer than this, I felt floored. I mean, obviously, you know, it's in my top 10 favorite movies ever, but I was just completely blown away by what I had just seen, and it was one of the only times in my life I'd ever gotten out of the theater thinking that I had seen a modern masterpiece, basically. And I didn't get that feeling for Dune, but I still liked it quite a bit. Firstly, just as a visual spectacle, as with a bunch of Denis Villeneuve movies, it is gorgeous. The visual effects blend in with the environments amazingly, and it's sort of, I've heard it compared to the Star Wars film Rogue One, where the visual effects, they don't look like CGI in that movie, they look real, like they're actually there. And there's a sense of scale to everything in the movie, the ships, the planets, all of it, the sandworms. And something else that I like about his movies is that they are very long and very slow, which could be a problem for some people. But I really like long movies that just sort of take their time and let you sort of sit in it. I know a lot of people don't like just shots of landscapes, but with Denis Villeneuve, his movies, like, you can take so many shots from his movies and they would be great screensavers. And I don't know, I just sort of like that sort of documentary style, sort of like a nature documentary style of making a movie, but with characters, and sort of just getting used to the world and feeling the environment as they do, as opposed to feeling like they're standing on a soundstage with a green screen. Also, another thing is that usually with this type of movie, or even novel, it's really hard to make something feel established in either a fantasy or a sci-fi world, and there are a few people that I think can do it really well. Some stuff feels a little bit too fakey to me. Like, I've never seen the Divergent movies or novels, so I can't really speak on that. But there's something about that type of movie or book that it feels like they're trying, or like the Maze Runner, for example, or it feels like they try to like set it up like, yeah, we're legit, like we have all our world and we have all our rules and a sense of geography. But there's just something about it that feels kind of phony in the way that Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and I would say this, don't feel phony. But there's something about Dune that I feel like, for me personally, kind of teeters the line. Not that it's the film's fault, but there's just, when there's a series that like builds up all these rules, it's sort of hard to follow if you don't have it go through the main character, I personally think. For example, with Harry Potter and Star Wars, even though like Luke Skywalker lives on a desert planet, he, by the standards of the world, is a regular guy, and we see all of these new things through him. But for example, with Dune here, Timothée Chalamet's character Paul, he is already accustomed to the world of royalty and of these powers. So when that sort of stuff comes in, I feel a little bit disconnected as an audience member, because we're not seeing the world with the character. We're being shown it through a character who already has this knowledge, which I think can be a little bit frustrating and sort of takes away from some of the growth of the character. And with Paul, he is going to this other planet that he's never been to. So I guess you could argue that his sort of isolation from the rest of the world and the dangers of the world are what make him more normal in comparison to this grand journey he's about to go to with dangerous conditions and enemies and animals. I also think the movie does a good job sort of setting up the rules of the powers. There's this thing called the voice that the Bene Gesserit, I believe that's how you pronounce it, have. It's sort of like a mind control, and this movie does a lot of show don't tell, which is really great. It just shows you that, and I feel like there's some of the politics are going to be hard to understand if you haven't read the book. I've only read a portion of the book, and I feel like I would have a better understanding if I had read the novel. But in the movie, it does do a pretty good job of sort of showing, not telling, what's happening, and you basically, for yourself, have to put together what's happening. But it's not like you're going in completely blind to the politics and the way the world works and operates. So I have a feeling that this movie really isn't going to be for everyone. The trailers do make it look more of like an action sci-fi movie, which it really isn't. It's more of a meditative and slow film with little bits of action in it. There's barely any action in the movie, I'll just say that. And there's some stuff in the trailer that is manipulated to look like big action set pieces when really those things don't happen in the way you think they do. If you watch the movie, you'll understand what I mean. So it sort of feels like they kind of have to manipulate the trailer to make it look like this big epic thing that most people will want to go see, and then they'll see it and then maybe they'll be like, this is boring, and get out of there, and not really appreciate it for what it is. And the thing is, this is only part 1 of 2, and people were saying the movie ends suddenly. I really didn't feel that. When it was like going to wrap up, I was like, okay, this is a good place to stop before part 2. And unlike other things like Lord of the Rings, where they filmed all 3 back to back, with this, they're just putting out the first one, seeing how it does financially, and if it does well, they'll let Denis Villeneuve do part 2. So part 2 will not be out next year. It hasn't even started filming. They just want to see how this does. And if this movie does not make enough money, it will not get part 2, and we will not be able to see the rest of it. Which is why it's so frustrating that they released it on HBO Max, because a bunch of people are going to watch it there instead of in the theater, where it was amazing to watch on IMAX. And I'm so glad I did that instead of HBO Max. But going to the theater and paying for the ticket to see it in theaters will essentially be the help that the movie needs to get part 2. If more people go see it in theaters instead of on HBO Max and on streaming, part 2 is much more likely to happen.
Also, I'm currently in the editing phase for this video, and Dune was actually already greenlit for another sequel, even though in this video, which I did several days ago, it was not yet. So good job to everyone that went out there and saw us in the theater.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to watch the movie a second time, probably on HBO Max, since I already paid to see it in the theater, and I'm going to sort of collect my thoughts and see if there's anything more I have to say at a later date. This will probably end up on my top 10 of the year at the end of December. So what I'm going to do is in my portion where I talk about Dune, I'll have more to say probably that will be in addition to this review. But there's just so much to it that it kind of fried my brain. But I did like the film a lot. and I think you should go see it if you like nice, slow sci-fi movies. So those are my thoughts on Dune. I'll have another review next week on a couple of other things that I've been behind on, and thank you so much for listening.